Hello, family, and welcome back to my channel. Hello, welcome back. I'm super excited to be back with another video today, you guys. Today is going to be a live that I'm just pre-recording that you guys will hear later. And as you can see by the title, it's probably going to be a very confrontational episode because y'all know how we do. God gives me a revelation, and it's not just for me, but He does whip me with it first before it comes to you guys. So today we're going to be talking about taking responsibility. And so this is in all different areas, but specifically, we're going to be talking about taking responsibility for the things that are going on in our lives. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. If you're new to my channel, make sure that you take a second to hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss when I post a new video, which is every Sunday. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss. I already said that, y'all. Let's just go ahead and get into it. Okay, so today's episode is called It's Not the Enemy, It's You. And this revelation came from some quiet time that I had with God. And I was just taking a look over at my life. And I was in this state where I was complaining, I was murmuring, I was extremely frustrated with a lot of things that were going on in my life. And so I began to just cry out to God for help. And I don't know about y'all, but when the Holy Spirit speaks to me, sometimes He just be having to pluck me upside my head because we can get so caught up in our emotions that we don't see our role in the things that are happening in our lives. And I just want to preface this by saying that not everything that happens in your life is your fault. I want to say that. So this is not, if you're in a situation where the circumstances are completely out of your control, this video is not for you. I'm talking about people who have played a part in some of the things that are going on in their lives. So just stick around so I can really explain. But specifically in the role of, let's just put it under the lens of temptation, right? There are some things that happen in our lives because we have been tempted by the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. So we have desired things that maybe necessarily God didn't have in our will, or we saw an opportunity and we took it and it didn't work out. So now we're dealing with the consequences of the things that we chased after. And I really want to talk about taking responsibility because I feel like it's something that we don't do enough of. It's so much easier to just blame everybody around us for what's going on in our lives. We feel like, oh, because this person did this, this is why I'm going through this. If this person had never said this and I wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z, or if this opportunity was never there, then this wouldn't be going on in my life. And we go down this rabbit hole of just complaining and blaming other circumstances. But at the end of the day, God is a God who holds us responsible for what we do. And so that's what that's really about. And so I want to start with a scripture, and it's in James chapter 1, verses 14 through 15. And it says, "Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death." Now, I want to talk about the lens of temptation, not just as like lustful and sexual temptation, but there's a lot of other temptations in life that we don't talk about. We are tempted to ask for more than what we need, right? We're tempted to crave positions and places that God has not given to us. We're tempted to complain. We're tempted to rebel and be disobedient. And all temptation is an opportunity for rebellion. Let's call it that. Temptation is an opportunity. It's when opportunity meets desire, right? And so don't just look at temptation as just like somebody, as a lustful thing, but also, well, it is a lustful thing, but just not a sexual thing because it exists so much more outside of that. But it says that temptation comes from our own desires. So if we're honest, there are things in our heart that we desire that are not in the will of God. There are things, it says that the heart is deceitfully wicked, and only God knows what's in our heart. So it's a lot of times we are looking at things from an external perspective, and we're like, oh, I would never desire those things. But God knows what's deep down on the inside of our hearts. And the enemy, what he does is he doesn't really know what's in our hearts, but he does study our past behaviors. He studies our past mistakes. And what he does is he begins to set up things in our life as just like, he kind of dangles them in front of our face to see what we're going to do. And he bases the things that he's going to set up by things that we've agreed to do in our past, or things that we have maybe desired in our past and it didn't work out. So all you can see is that the enemy is constantly plotting and planning and positioning things in front of your face to get you to give in. Now, what's important is that All the enemy can do is present something. The enemy cannot force you to do something. All he can do is place things in front of your way. And so with us, the responsibility comes in when we make the choice to give into that thing. And a lot of us, we always talk about, oh, the enemy's trying to trap me, the enemy's trying to grab me up, the enemy's trying to do all these things, but the enemy is just doing his job. He's a thief. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And the way that he does that is by presenting opportunities in front of your face that will pull you away from God. But because God has given us power, he's given us authority and dominion over sin. We're no longer a slave to sin. We're no longer a slave to our desires. It is then our responsibility to make the right choice, which is choosing God. And I don't feel like we were ever taught that. I feel like we were taught it's just the enemy. It's always the enemy. Like, no, sometimes the enemy is you. Sometimes the enemy is the things that are in your heart that are unconfessed before God, that then give birth to, just like it says in James 1, these sinful actions. And so we really have to start going to God and being like, God, reveal to me what's in my heart, just reveal to me what's in my heart. Because once you do that, God will begin to do just that. He will show you the things that could possibly lead you away from him. He will show you the things in your heart that are not of him. And as a good father, he will prune those things out of you, and it will help you to make much more pure decisions. And so the enemy, we have to stop giving the enemy more power than he has. Like, God has given us authority to trample over serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. I believe that's in Luke. He's given us power over the enemy, which means that the enemy only has as much power as we give him. And so we have to stop blaming our situations on the enemy, and stop blaming our situations on people, and start taking responsibility for our healing, taking responsibility for the times where we made choices that, like, just we knew better, right? It's not saying that as in a guilt way, like trying to guilt you for the decisions that you made, but just taking responsibility. Like, yes, I made these choices, and now because I made these choices, this is where I am. It does not mean that God will not help you out of your situation, because God is with us and he's promised to never leave or forsake us. But it does mean that we have to own up and take responsibility. Nobody is going to, even when God rescues you out of a situation, there's always something that he requires of you. It says faith without works is dead. You can believe in faith that God is going to get you out of the situation that you're in, but there's also going to be works. There's going to be action that he requires you to take. And sometimes it's the action that he requires us to take that makes us uncomfortable, and then that's what makes us complain, because sometimes it's something that's inconvenient, it's something that we don't feel like doing, or maybe it's something that's extremely uncomfortable, and we're just like, I don't really want to do that, so let me just continue to complain and murmur about my situation, or let me just continue to complain so and so, or compare myself to so and so, because it's much easier to do that than for me to take responsibility for something that I really don't want to do. And so we really have to come out of this place, especially when it comes to healing, for an example, right? When God sets you free from a situation, you are no longer a victim of that situation, but you become a victim by your own desires to stay one. When it comes to healing, the only way to heal something is to confront it. You confront it head on, and you allow God to give you the strategy and the wisdom to overcome that thing. But if you don't take control for your healing, then you'll continuously be a victim for the rest of your life. And God has not called you to be a victim, but a victor. And so I'm just throwing out different examples so you guys can see that we have to, as a people, start taking responsibility for where we are. If you are not where you want to be in your life, then you have to make some different decisions. If you are consistently in this, and we just finished up a fast about cycles and breaking the cycles that are in our lives. And what was revealed is that a cycle continues until you do something different, right? Like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And so the only way that you can do something different is by analyzing, taking the time to say, okay, how did I even get here in this place, right? Once you do that, of course, the Lord will bring things to your remembrance, and he will partner with you through this. Once you do that, you have to make a different decision. If you are constantly in a cycle of poverty, you're constantly in a cycle of debt, then you have to do something differently than you have done the years before. If you are constantly in a season where you're exposed into toxic relationships and toxic friendships, that is a pattern, and you have to do something differently in order to break it. And sometimes it's facing your own self, dealing with the healing, the parts of you that attract brokenness, the things that that hurt and are uncomfortable. It requires you to go heal from your past, but it requires action. We have to come out of the space where we are seeking all of these sermons and seeking all of these people to help us with problems that only we can make the decision to change. Even God doesn't force you to do something. God gives us free will. And in our free will, he gives us the free will to make decisions. And those decisions, we will eat the fruit of them, whether they're good decisions or bad decisions. We'll reap good fruit or bad fruit out of our lives. But at the end of the day, it comes down to us. And so, like I said, the whole point of this video is to really get us to come out of this desire to get people and circumstances and all this stuff to come change something for us. Like a lot of people, they'll ask for accountability, right? I just need accountability to do this. I need accountability to help me do this. And accountability is a great thing. In fact, you are 99% more likely to accomplish a task if you have an accountability partner. But the thing about accountability is that accountability is not with you everywhere that you go. And so when you go home and it's just you and your walk with God, and you're experiencing, a situation, and maybe your accountability partner can't get to you in time, it's not for you to blame your accountability partner or anybody else for what you do next. And so we have to get to the place where we are holding ourselves accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to stop waiting for other people to come rescue us and make our own decisions. And in the decisions that we make, sorry, y'all, it's about to rain, but in the decisions that we make, God will us. He will partner with us and give us the strength that we need to make our decisions. He'll give us the strategy and the wisdom to get out of our situations. But it's not like waiting for a knight in shining armor without you having to do nothing. God is God. He partners with us in order for us to do his will on earth. And his will is for us to have an abundant life. His will is for us to be walking in our purposes and our callings and our assignments. His will is for us to love one another and serve one another as he's called us to do. His will is not for us to be in cycles. His will is not for us to be entangled. And his will is definitely not for us to be living a victim and a powerless life. But the only way we get out of that is by making decisions. Make a decision to work on yourself. Make a decision to process your pain instead of transferring it to different voids. Make a decision to build yourself up. Make a decision to surrender to God, to do the last thing that he told you to do. Make a decision and take responsibility for where you are, because you cannot blame anybody in this world for where you are, even if you came up in the most horrible situation and upbringing. And I am so sorry if that has happened to you, but at the end of the day, nothing changes until you do. You have to be the decision maker that says, I no longer am going to live like this. I'm no longer going to be a victim of my circumstances anymore, but I'm going to make the hard decisions. I'm going to do the hard work that it takes to come out of this place. And God is with you. You don't have to make these decisions alone, but you do have to take responsibility. You do have to take responsibility. So again, this is not the season where we're blaming the enemy for where we are. We made decisions. We all made decisions that don't even make no sense. We don't even know why we made the decisions. We were hurt. We made decisions in our past that we regret. God has forgiven us. He's wiped the slate clean. And now he's saying, what are you going to do with the clean slate? What are you going to do with the new path? What are you going to do with the new life that I'm giving you? That is the question that I want to leave you guys with. What are you going to do now that you have, that God has answered your prayers? He's given you strategy. What are you going to do with that strategy? God's revealed a situation to you that you've been asking and praying him for. What are you going to do with that opportunity? So that pretty much wraps it up. I just want to end with just a couple things just that you can just things to focus on to get out of this place. And number one is to continuously set your eyes on God. If you keep your eyes on God and not on these little petty things that are going on around you, or not only your own desires, you're that much more likely to be able to stay the path and focus on what God has for you. It's only when we take our eyes off of God that we're susceptible to the temptations and the opportunities that God puts in front of us. It's when we take our eyes off of God that we start to serve ourselves and give into our own selfish desires, because we're naturally selfish. We're not naturally wired to serve God and to do selfless things. And that's why we have the Holy Spirit on the inside of us that helps us to literally live a life that is pleasing unto God. And a life that is pleasing unto God is a selfless life. It is a life where you're giving yourself as a living sacrifice unto him and to whoever he's called you to. Number 2, take responsibility for your actions and your healing. If you need to get therapy, get therapy. If you need to separate yourself from the people that you've been around and you need to spend more time with God to get through some healing so you're not wounding other people or you're not bleeding on other people while you're trying to heal, do that. If you have to do things that are uncomfortable, the things that God has told you that don't make sense, do those things so you're not in the same place. Number 3, study and apply God's wisdom quickly. A lot of times God has given us strategy. He's given us the wisdom and the next step that we need to take to get out of this place. But we sit on it for too long. We're procrastinating. We're saying, you know what, God, I'm not ready yet. God, this isn't the right time. God, I need more confirmation. We have so many excuses. And God is like, I need you to obey and to obey quickly. Because some of the things that God is telling you to do are time sensitive. And when you do not act on those things, you miss a window. And God in his grace, yes, he will bring that thing back around for you, but you miss the grace that God allotted for that moment. And now you're having to wait years and years and years later. Like I said, and what is the point of wasting valuable time when God has given you a grace to do whatever it is that he has for you now? Whether it's uncomfortable, whether it doesn't make any sense, obey and obey quickly. Knowledge is only useful if you use it. It's no point in asking God to reveal something to you or give you strategy if you're never going to do what he said to do. And number 4, hold yourself accountable. People are not with you everywhere you go. In the moments that you really need accountability, it's probably only going to be you and God, and that has to be enough. God has to be enough for you in this season. You have to begin to let him in to fill those voids, because when those voids are open, you have those parts of your heart that are still wounded, that still desire things that are not of God. The enemy will always be able to tempt you into giving into false comfort, giving into a counterfeit opportunity because you're wounded. So hold yourself accountable. Stay focused on God. Hold yourself accountable and take responsibility. That is it for this message. I just pray that God will strengthen you, that you will open your heart to receive this message, and that you will really begin to take responsibility for where you are, because God has so many amazing things planned for you, and you cannot afford to be distracted in cycles. You can't afford to be entangled up in mess that you don't need to be in. You can't afford to be choosing counterfeit opportunities and counterfeit partners and friendships. You don't have time for that. God has so many things in store. And so it's my prayer that y'all take it seriously, and that you just begin to open your heart up to God and say, God, what do you need me to do right now? God, how can I give more of myself to you? God, remove these distractions, these things that I really desire but are not good for me. God, get these things up out of my heart so that I can serve you in the way that you've called me to. So this wraps up another, I almost said episode. This wraps up the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you in the next one.